Hi, yours. What do you think of that audio? Was it very spooky audio?
It was a spooky audio.
Do you think it's specifically made for a horror film?
I feel like it could definitely be made for a horror film.
Did it give you chills?
Yeah, what is that audio?
Well, to your surprise, to also my surprise, it's not a pre-made audio. It's actually recorded naturally from Antarctica. The researchers from Antarctica actually recorded it from the Ross Ice Shelf, which is the largest ice shelf in the whole world, and it's as big as Spain. It's basically the wind hitting the ice slab.
And yeah, because the sound kind of almost seems like it was some sort of a mechanical engine or something like that, almost like an alien type of sound. But you're telling me that this is just wind hitting the ice slab? The biggest ice, what is it, shield? No.
Sheet.
Ice sheet? It's the size of Spain?
Yep, in Antarctica.
And this is literally what you hear all day.
Well, it's basic. We can't hear it
Okay.
on our human ears. Well, the researchers were able to eavesdrop on it by using seismic sensors. So they basically recorded it,
Okay.
and they thought it was weird, and they sped it up a little bit, and they released that audio.
But is it safe to say that you could probably hear something similar to this?
Probably.
And this is relevant because this is happening in West Antarctica, right?
Definitely.
And today's topic for our podcast, welcome back, by the way, guys, to another Wednesday night mysteries podcast episode, episode number 2. We're going to be talking about the mysterious disappearance of a scientist named Carl R. Disch, who actually vanished from West Antarctica. And this is an interesting way to begin the topic because he could have potentially been hearing these sounds on a regular basis. Now, this could
Or
probably...
maybe he felt some vibrations.
Exactly. Well, let's look at this case closer. Also, a quick note before we get going. Both of us are, we have been sick pretty much leading up to the recording. So, and we're not recording on the regular recording times. So basically, our apologies if there are any issues with the recording.
And if we sound weird.
Exactly. Anyways, let's begin with the story. I'll give a quick introduction about Carl R. Disch. Carl Robert Disch, who was 26 years of age at the time of his disappearance, is currently presumed dead, and he is presumed to have died in 1965. Now, Carl was an ionospheric physicist for the National Bureau of Standards who went missing near Byrd Station in Antarctica on May 8th, 1965. Now, Carl Disch had joined the Boulder Laboratories staff a year prior to his disappearance. He was working for the CRPL, which stands for the Central Radio Propagation Laboratory, and it was basically located in the Antarctic. Now, Carl Disch was stationed at the radio noise building of Byrd Station to work on his ionospheric studies. On the morning of May 8th, 1965, he actually departed the radio noise building to return to the main station complex of Byrd Station that was around 1.3 miles away. Now, throughout this time of year, there were intermittent storms with winds up to 45 knots and visibility reduced to zero by heavy blowing snow, seasonal darkness, and overcast. When Carl Disch had not arrived at the main station within a reasonable time, a search party departed the station to search for him. Now, his trail was spotted initially, but the search party had to return to the station to refuel And also, the conditions were not ideal, and they had to basically go back because they were at risk of getting lost themselves. Upon their return, after they had already refueled, the trail that was uncovered previously had now been covered by drifting snow and was never rediscovered again, despite exhaustive searches and measures taken to make the station more visible so that Carl could find his way back home. They actually fired flares and illuminated the station with floodlights. Carl Disch was never found, neither him or his body. Basically, we don't know what happened to him. While he was missing, though, temperatures had actually dropped to minus 79 Fahrenheit, and this would be minus 62 Celsius. That's very cold. The search was actually called off around 6 days later on May 14th. He is presumed dead and his body has never been recovered. Memorial services were held in his hometown of Monroe, Wisconsin. Once again, he was only 26 years of age at the time of his disappearance.
To add more into that, Antarctica is obviously the coldest and the windiest of all the continents, but it is also actually a desert. Despite being surrounded by snow, it is actually a polar desert, and it holds the record for the lowest temperature on Earth, obviously, which is negative 89.2 Celsius. And for our American listeners, it's negative 128.6 degree Fahrenheit.
That's crazy.
Definitely crazy. Do you want to live there?
Definitely not. I'll pass. How about you?
No, I could even barely survive negative 20.
Exactly. We're already freezing here.
Yeah. So, in the continent of Antarctica, there are only two seasons, which is the winter and the summer. Yes, there is summer in Antarctica, but it's still also very cold. So, the summer in Antarctica starts in October and ends in March, while the winter starts from March and lasts until the October, the rest of the months.
The rest of the month. And,
Yeah.
and since Carl went missing in May,
It's generally a winter month.
it's generally a winter month, but it's just the beginning of winter. So potentially, I mean, obviously I'm not certain, but it wasn't the harshest climate just yet, but it was getting there. I would
Yeah, it
assume.
was getting there. I actually looked more into it, and
Okay.
I read that, well, weather in Antarctica during May is generally poor because it's a winter month and the daylight hours are practically very little to none. So probably by the time he disappeared, it was a bit dark, and by the time they looked for him, it was getting darker and darker.
Oh, gotcha. And that made the search even more difficult and
Yeah,
dangerous
I
at the
bet.
same time. Okay, cool. I think we could talk a little bit about the actual station itself, right? Because we're gonna go jump into the details of his disappearance more in depth shortly. I want to talk a little bit about the Byrd station because, I found it pretty interesting. And this is the station where he was stationed and he went missing from. So obviously it's relevant for us to kind of talk a little bit about it, right? So the Byrd station is a former research station established by the United States. The station consisted of a set of 4 prefabricated buildings and was erected in less than 1 month by the US Navy. It was commissioned on January 1st, 1957. This was the original station called Old Byrd, and it lasted about 4 years before it began to collapse under the snow. Now, there was a following rebuild initiative, and they made the new Byrd station. So Carl Robert Disch actually was stationed in the newer Byrd station. But I'm going to talk about this shortly. The construction of a second underground station in a nearby location began in 1960, and it was used, the new station itself, until 1972. So this is the time period during which Carl went missing, because he went missing in 65. Now, I have a little bit of information regarding how they built the original station. I found it pretty interesting, so I want to quickly read some information. I found this on a website at 80 degrees south latitude and 119 degree west longitude. It's not a spot on the world map suitable for a family vacation. I think that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
The Navy personnel charged with establishing the original Byrd station during the 1956-57 season for the International Geophysical Year, which was some sort of an initiative to bridge the gap between, I think, scientists during the Cold War era, so that scientists from the West and scientists from the East, the Soviet Union, could kind of merge. I think China was the only country that did not participate, but I'm not really... have you ever heard about the geophysical year?
Actually, no, I'm just learning from you.
Yeah, me
It's
neither.
very interesting.
Yeah, apparently there was an initiative to kind of bridge the gap between both sides during the Cold War, so that the scientists could actually, progress humankind in general. And during that original year, the original Byrd station was commissioned. Now, the people, the Navy personnel, at first balked at the idea of heading some 1,000 kilometers by tractor train across the unknown crevice-ridden ice of West, but they drove the distance twice in one summer and built one of the first research stations deep in the interior of the Antarctic continent. Now, this original station was named after the famed polar explorer Richard Byrd Jr. The new station was something of a hurried ad hoc effort that first season, when the military officially commissioned it on January 1st, 1957. Yeah, because apparently they managed to build it in 1 month, which is crazy, right?
Definitely.
Could you imagine travel 1,000 kilometers in West Antarctica, you don't know where you're going, and then you start building.
That's extreme.
That's-
under harsh weathers.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's insane. Like, people really had hard jobs back in the day when you think about it, right? Now, a tunnel system of the original Byrd station connected the station's 5 main buildings, but most of the supplies for the underground corridors had never arrived, actually. And I don't blame the people who were in charge of those supplies. They were like, we'll pass.
Yeah.
We're not traveling 1,000 kilometers in West Antarctica. So the men who were there actually had to improvise, and they welded together empty oil drums to serve as vertical columns for the tunnel framework. The first winter, our crew of scientists and Navy personnel had enough food, if the variety was limited, but a short supply of libations, including a ration of only 10 cans of beer per person for the entire season of darkness. That's not enough beer. If you're stuck there, you need more beer.
That is true.
That's not enough
Just
beer.
think of it, it's like 6 months of darkness and you only had 10 cans of beer. Definitely not
I
enough.
would probably keep all of them until my last 2 days.
And get wasted.
Yeah, probably, right? Okay, so also the first station, it's important to mention, was only used for 4 years, as mentioned earlier, because the weight of snow threatened to collapse it, because it was underground. Construction of the second research station began in 1960. This is the same station where Carl went missing. It was about 6 miles from the original location. Prefabricated buildings with steel, as they called the wonder arches, were lowered into man-made trenches and manually covered with snow, a concept first developed and tested in Greenland by the US Army. Now, this station was commissioned on February 13th, 1961. The new Byrd station was located underground, except for some scientific structures. Tunnels connecting the station's various facilities, which served to support the largest inland scientific program at that time. So basically, most of the Byrd station, there was, from what I could assume, because I didn't really found a lot of information like how the Byrd station looked. I think there was a main complex the living quarters, I would say. And on different areas surrounding the Byrd station, there were other like scientific locations. So one of them was that radio house where Carl R. Disch was actually working and conducting his ionospheric studies. And another interesting thing to mention here is that the original Byrd station was actually underground, which is pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, just to clarify things, the radio station is a different building from his quarters, right?
I would assume so. And the radio station was 1.3 miles away.
I bet.
And how it all connects, well, how they actually traversed this distance, we're gonna get into it. And it's gonna be important for us to solve this mystery.
Now that we've talked about the Byrd station in general, it's time to talk about the disappearance in more details. So Carl Disch had traveled between the main station complex and the radio noise building, performing his scientific studies on a regular basis. He had traveled the route over 25 times during the season, which he went missing. So this is an everyday occurrence for him now, right?
I would say probably not every day, but I would probably say weekly at the very least.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, on the day of his disappearance, Carl had visited the radio noise installation building operated by Frank Riesley for the CRPL.
Right, it's the CRPL, that, I guess, institution that was kind of operating those research facilities in Antarctica. So this Frank Riesley, that I did not find any information about this guy, but he was apparently the man in charge of the radio noise building where Carl was last seen.
I see. So at 9:15 a.m., Carl Disch departed the radio noise building and was presumably returning to the main station complex, 1.3 miles south of the radio noise building. Now, a handline runs from the meteorology building at the main station to the ladder at the base of the radio noise building.
Right, so I wanted to stop right here a little bit because this makes a lot of sense. And when we're going to be talking about the theories here and what had potentially happened, this is important, the handline. Because, when you think about it, the handline is an obvious thing to have in these facilities. So what is a handline? A handline, as I understand it, is basically this line, like a wire or something like that you could hold on to and you could walk holding it. And, it's basically connecting the main facility of Byrd Station and this radio noise building. So what Carl essentially had to do, he had to hold on to this handline.
Or maybe attach himself with a hook?
Yeah, something like that. I'm not really sure how it worked. But one way or another, he was supposed to follow that handline. And if he safely followed that handline, he would have went back home to basically the main Byrd station. And we will find out soon enough that apparently he had not done that, but that's coming up.
By 10 a.m., Carl Disch had not arrived back at the Byrd station. A vehicle search party departed the station to search the area off the handline. About 11:30 a.m., Carl's trail was picked up leading west of Byrd station. It led to the southwest corner of the Skyway, a distance of about 4 miles. At this point, the search party returned to the station to refuel. They returned to the field and spent 3 more hours trying to pick up the trail, but to no avail. Winds of 25 to 30 knots and drifting snow covered the tracks made by Carl Disch and rapidly covered the tracks, making the safe return of the search party very difficult. They returned to the Byrd station at around 18:15 p.m. 45 minutes later, at 19 p.m. or 7 p.m., another search party was sent to investigate the area of the handline, emergency Jamesway, and dump. No tracks were found. At 19:50 or 7:50 p.m., the available search personnel made a human chain search from the dump area to the end of the skyway. Flares were fired every half hour from the station's tower, and floodlights were rigged over the station. Visibility conditions eventually prevented the flares from being useful, and they were discontinued. Another vehicle search party was launched the following day, on May 9th at 18 p.m. or 6 p.m. It covered a 1 mile wide by 9 mile long area running south of the skyway. The party found occasional tracks and followed them to about 4 miles south of the station, where they disappeared. There was no noticeable shortening of the stride in these tracks. An 8-man search party equipped with 2 vehicles, a Jamesway, and sufficient fuel and provisions to last a week departed the station at 7:40 a.m. on 10th of May on a southerly track. It surged to about 12 miles south of the station, marking the trail with flags. No tracks were found, however. On 12th of May, 4 days into Carl's disappearance, they searched the northeast and north-southeast sectors of the old Byrd station. Visibility was good, but darkness was severely limited their range of vision. The next 2 days, visibility was so poor due to the blowing snow and fog that no search was possible.
Alright, so Robert Disch, at the time of his disappearance, it's important to mention that he was fully clothed with the customary Antarctic clothing. The temperature during the search was about minus 44 Fahrenheit or minus 42 Celsius. I think at some points it went very cold, but I think this is the general information that I had. Nevertheless, very harsh. Let's put it that way. The tracks that were found indicated, or the initial tracks that were found, indicated that he did not contact the handline. Now, this is strange. Once again, the handline started at the ladder of the radio noise building, and it would lead towards the main complex, the living quarters of Byrd Station. But apparently, Carl Robert Disch, he never actually came in contact with the handline. So he immediately started heading in the direction directly downwind. Now, due to the length of time that Carl has been missing in the exposure of the Antarctic winter, he was presumed to be dead. However, there have been some conspiracies that had popped up following his disappearance. Now, his disappearance, the disappearance of Carl Disch, had spawned many conspiracy theories. They are given somewhat of legitimacy because of an alleged message transmitted to the McMurdo station in 1971. This was 6 years after he had been missing. Now, the author of the message that was allegedly transmitted to the McMurdo station, which is also a station in Antarctica, but it's quite a bit off from the Byrd station. Now, the author who made that transmitted, message claimed to be Carl Disch himself, and he stated that he was alive. Now, this message has been disregarded as a hoax, and apparently I found something on Reddit that the person who made up this hoax, that there was some sort of a message. He was actually some guy who was writing kind of science fiction and about Antarctica in particular. So this was probably just some guy who kind of came up with this idea, and it was not really real.
Yeah, that's most likely the case.
It's a hoax, right?
Yeah, very strange though. It's kind of creepy.
It's kind of creepy if it was real.
Yeah.
But then again, are we to believe that he somehow survived for 6 years?
In a barren, cold land? Definitely not.
Where did he go?
Oh, where will he get the food?
Exactly. That just didn't make any sense.
Now, can we talk about how important the handline is? Because, as you mentioned, everything there is connected by a handline. If I heard it correctly.
Yes, I think at least the facilities that are kind of some distance away from the main living quarters, because it makes sense. If that research facility was 1.3 miles away, then it would be probably too risky to just kind of try to find it, because you probably can't see one station from another, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because the visibility is very poor. So it would be like a suicide mission trying to get back to the main station without such a handline.
That is true, and if the snow falls very heavy and the visibility is close to zero, handlines are very useful.
Well, I mean, without them, I don't think you can traverse, especially back in the day. Probably these days, I'm not really sure if they're still doing handlines. Probably they still do, because I would imagine some sort of satellite technology probably is now so advanced that they could probably just use their electronics. But back in the day, this was mid 60s. I mean, they didn't have as much gadgets as they do right now.
That is true. I have another question. Have you ever been lost before?
Probably, yeah, but not that I can recall. I don't think I ever had like a very traumatic experience where I was lost.
Yeah, but my question is that when you were lost, did you kept on walking forward on a straight manner, or did you stop and looked around?
Well, the only times I could remember being lost was at the grocery store, being lost away from my parents as I was a little kid. I don't remember what I did. Probably was just kind of running around recklessly. I'm thinking, have I ever been lost?
Recently, maybe you're looking for a store.
Yeah, probably. I think at some point you started out. I would probably say I probably keep going forward, but the longer that I go, the more doubts creep into my mind how I made a wrong turn somewhere.
So eventually you would stop, or would you just keep on going?
I think I would stop. I think I'm a person who would probably stop eventually.
Yeah. So this case doesn't make much sense because he kept going, right?
It's actually a very good point, because I have written down a few questions regarding this, and I mainly have two questions that I would like to get answers for in this case. And what you've just said kind of ties into one of my questions. So one of the questions, believe it or not, is why did Carl did not follow his own trail back to the radio station? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because his trail was picked up, and like an hour after he went missing or something like that. So if he was truly missing, and if he truly wanted, I don't know, to go back home or something like that, why did he not follow his own tracks back to the radio station? Does this make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and that's actually a good question because I kept on trying to remember the number of times I got lost, and there were numerous times. I would always stop, maybe walk around the area, and head back the same way that I went in. So if you would look at my tracks, they're literally everywhere, and I would go back. So this is a pretty confusing and curious case because he didn't do anything.
He basically
vanished.
He kept on walking as if he knew where he was going. And another question is, why did he not follow the handline? And if he was not following the handline, this is the bizarre thing to me. If he was not holding on to the handline, how was he so confident in where he was going? He had already made this trip 25 times. At least. So he had held the handline back and forth on multiple occasions. On this occasion, he decides not to hold the handline. He walks in the opposite direction from where the handline is basically, where he would have to go to get to his living quarters on that other station 1.3 miles away. And he walks with confidence because he never turns back.
Yeah.
And he did leave his snow tracks. He could have went back, but he just kept walking. And I believe we read from our notes that his trail was picked up like 4 miles into the opposite direction. So he was walking for a while. Why was he walking in the opposite direction? This doesn't make any sense. At first, when I first found out about this case, I was like, okay, this is some science guy, and he probably went, made the wrong turn and got lost in the Antarctic, and story closed. But when you actually think about it, this is so mysterious. There's a handline. You literally just hold the handline and you get back home. This guy doesn't hold the handline, immediately starts walking in a different direction and doesn't ever turn back when his tracks were still fresh and he could have turned back.
That is true. Do you think he went for a stroll?
I don't think so. I don't think the conditions were such that you would go on a stroll.
That is true, but maybe he wanted to get some air and he started walking.
But that's strange because let's remember that the distance between the radio room where he was working and the main station is 1.3 miles. His tracks were found 4 miles away. So he made that distance at least 3 times over, and he still kept going forward. And I actually found some information on Reddit, I believe, where someone said that it was indicated that he had his, footprints indicated that he had a sense of confidence and knowingness of where he was going. So his footprints never really, let's say, began, like the distance between his feet never shrunk, meaning that he had a very confident stride wherever he was going.
Pace.
Yeah, a regular pace. That's what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? That's bizarre.
Do you think he saw something or heard something and he's following it?
Now, remember that thing that that we played at the beginning of this podcast?
The creepy music?
The creepy music? Could it? I mean, this would be crazy, but is there a chance that he heard that and he wanted to go and investigate?
I'm not quite sure because from what I've read, we can't hear it from our natural ear. We couldn't hear it.
I know. So basically that recording is enhanced or is captured by electronic devices that can pick it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But who knows?
Who knows, right?
Right. Yeah.
And this is where some of the theories come in. Shall we jump into some of the theories?
Let's go ahead.
Many strange stories have sprung up around Carl's disappearance. There is the case of his favorite husky dog, who was also said to have vanished without trace a short while after his disappearance. There was also stories of mysterious lights in the sky and odd engine noises. There's also the question of why Robert Disch walked out so resolutely. So I found this website and there's some information regarding Carl's disappearance. Now this is some sort of I think institution website, the US institution website. Now I'm not sure the credibility of these statements, but there is a quote that a colleague of Carl's said that he had stormed out after a card game had gone wrong. Apparently, Carl possibly accused someone else of cheating. Now, it's easy to imagine that in an isolated place like that, such a thing would get blown out of all magnitude. Another quote is that Carl had walked out to escape a colleague who was a nice guy, but he was really, really boring, and he just wanted to get away from that person, which is also kind of hard to believe, so I can't really think that these are credible sources of information. So I actually compiled a list of all of the potential theories that could be happening here, and there's a lot of clues that you can't really verify the legitimacy of those clues. So this is what could potentially be happening according to the information that I found online. So the first theory would be that he got lost in the weather conditions, but some people question this as he was quite experienced in his line of work. Another theory would be that he fell into a crevice somewhere there. Another theory is that he intentionally left or potentially committed suicide, but there is no possible motivation to do this, at least that we know of. Now, this is where the last two theories get a bit bonkers. So the first one would be an alien abduction, believe it or not. This is little bit out there because his footprints just stopped and didn't continue. So yeah, that's a theory. And the last one would be that he was actually working for, or he was abducted by, the Soviet Union. Because remember, this was the Cold War. So he was out in Antarctica doing his work during the Cold War, let's remember. Some believe that he was either abducted for what he knew or taken away by the Soviet Union because he was secretly working for them and his cover was about to be blown. He was very experienced in his field, so he would have been an asset if he was working for the Soviet Union. So this is another crazy theory that potentially agents from the Soviet Union abducted him. But that's a little bit out there. But I guess let's talk about what we think happened to Carl Disch.
Yeah, I would just also like to add that I read somewhere that there might be an alcohol or beer involved. Basically, from what I read, there was some sort of a card game when they were drinking beers. And then Carl Disch went out and was never been found again.
I think I heard something about beer and alcohol as well. I can't really recall where in the research, but I do recall it. It would make some sense because he did storm out, didn't even follow the handline. I was thinking maybe he did storm out, right? And he was so confident that he could find his way back to the radio station. And he walked and walked and walked, and eventually he realized that the wind had already covered his snow tracks, and he couldn't find his way back.
That is true.
That is potentially true. So out of all of these theories that we already discussed, and before we jump into our conclusion, I mean, do you have anything else that you would like to add potentially? Or have we missed anything from our research?
Not particularly, but I would just like to say that the Soviet Union theory might be the weirdest theory for me.
It is, right?
It's a little bit far-fetched.
I mean, okay, so let's think about what, out of all those theories that I mentioned, I would like to say...
Alien abduction as well.
Alien abduction is weird, right? Out of all of these theories... I mean, it's so bizarre. I don't know. Okay, so did he get lost in the weather conditions? Yes.
Most likely, yeah.
I think he got lost in the weather conditions. Now, okay, so from my research, and the only logical assumption I could make at this point is that he did walk out initially, and he did not want to return back to his living quarters. But maybe he was thinking of coming back. Now, I don't know, there was a poker game or some sort of an argument, but he probably walked out for some reason and just wanted to just go for a walk, clear his mind, something like that. And eventually he saw that his tracks got covered by snow and he couldn't find his way back, and the rescue teams couldn't find him in time. That's literally the only way I could explain his disappearance, because why else would he not follow the handline? If he wanted to go back home, why did he not follow the handline? It's so crazy. Regarding the suicide theory, there's literally no information that he was depressed or anything like that. Did you find anything like that?
Not really, but this could also make sense because we have to remember they're living in a tight enclosed space, And the outside, the weather is extremely harsh, so it's depressing either way.
Exactly. Right? And he was 26. So even though it's reported that he was an excellent scientist, he wasn't a hardened, let's say, Antarctic scientist. You know what I mean? There's probably people that have spent decades in the Antarctic studying, but he was only 26, so he was fairly fresh. I think he literally joined the last year. So
he just started.
He joined just a year ago, from what I recall. And those sounds and everything. I mean, the Antarctic is a cold place. Like, for me personally, I think I would have some problems.
I would definitely have some problems.
I wouldn't want to stay in that place.
I would go crazy in a week.
I would probably also not do really well there in a prolonged period of time.
Can you imagine living underground with nothing to see, and the weather is very harsh outside, with also nothing to see?
Exactly.
And that's your everyday life.
That's your everyday life.
It wouldn't last long.
Neither would I. Now, regarding the alien abduction or the Soviet Union theories, what do you think?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Hey, maybe there are aliens in Antarctica. I wouldn't want to say otherwise, but there are a lot of mysteries around that continent that we don't know about, but alien abduction for me is probably the least likely.
I mean, in theory, because I'm not saying that there aren't any aliens or whatever.
There might be.
No, yeah, for sure, and I'm not saying that alien abductions never happened, and maybe some actually did happen, but I think if that was the case, there would be some sort of more information. We have the aliens come into the picture here just because it's Antarctica and just because he vanished.
Yeah.
Exactly. So so in conclusion, what do you think happened?
Well, maybe he fell. That's actually something that I was thinking of. He might have fell somewhere.
That's a very good point. Maybe he went for a walk and he could still go back, but he got injured.
Good point.
Yeah, that's what you just said.
No, right? I was thinking like he was walking and then he fell in a hole or like fell over a cliff.
Oh.
But then wouldn't we know about it because there were search parties, right? They probably would have reported it like, oh, we found a cliff here somewhere.
I mean,
we found a sinkhole, unless the snow already covered it.
Exactly. And also, I don't think they could check every single crevice either. I think you brought a very good point. Maybe he actually got injured or fell somewhere and couldn't come back somehow.
Couldn't get back up.
Yeah, and just die there. It's a very sad way to go, nonetheless, because today I had this thought in my head, what Carl must have been feeling.
Probably very lonely.
Lonely and sad, right? I really feel bad for him, and I hope that I think he's dead at this point.
Yeah, well, let's just hope his soul will rest in peace or has already been.
Yeah, I would agree. I hope that Carl rests in peace because his life was not easy. At least the end. And
the fact that he may or may not, but I feel like he may be still buried in ice in there somewhere.
Because his body probably didn't decompose. It's minus 60.
Yeah, that is true.
I mean, I don't know how decomposition works, but I would assume that his
still
body
frozen there.
Yeah, somewhere as we speak. His body, his suit, his outfit, his bones are like, as we speak, are there somewhere
underneath layers and layers of snow,
and will never be found.
Probably never will. Because remember, you mentioned that the former Byrd station was no longer use it because it was nearly buried in snow after 4 years.
Exactly.
And how long has it been ever since Carl disappeared?
Since 65.
It's probably way deep.
That's almost 60 years. That's crazy. Well, I hope that Carl rest in peace, and
No matter where he might be.
yeah, exactly. And hopefully we will eventually learn some more details, but it's been a long time. I don't think we will, but let's hope. And yeah, it's been a good show, good podcast number 2. I had a very good time recording today.
Me too.
Anything you would like to, I don't know, say to our audience before we sign out?
Oh, let us know what you think about. Do you think it's an alien abduction, Soviet Union abduction, or do you think he fell into a hole or something?
Yeah, let us know, guys, and we will
Drop
join
a
you.
comment down below.
Yeah, drop a comment, and we will join you on the next episode. See ya, guys.
See
Bye.
ya.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.